Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is our first episode of Beyond the Tipping Point, a podcast that is dedicated to supporting the navigation of our new consciousness. I'm Tina Bowden. I'm a doctor of metaphysical science and a consciousness researcher, and I am thrilled to be joined today by this beautiful soul, Raina Dawn Lutz. Hi, Raina.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, Raina. So you embody a cornucopia of gifts and skills. So I would love for you to share with us who you are, what you do, and what led you onto this path.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be chatting with Tita. Tita, you're so cool. I'm just so grateful to be able to speak to you. I do consider myself a Swiss Army knife of wellness because I have so many tools in my toolbox. But my background is in holistic nutrition. And so I've had a private practice for over a decade as a holistic nutritionist. But I'm not your average nutritionist. I'm an intuitive nutritionist. And so I bring a lot of spiritual medicine work into my knowledge of nutrition. And I help people bridge ancestral healing into their food choices. I also have a fermentation community and a sobriety community on Facebook. So in addition to my private practice and my healing circles that I offer for community, I have many little hubs on the internet, on the interwebs. So that's what keeps my life full and beautiful is this work that I get to do that I'm really grateful that I get to do.
That's incredible. Okay. Well, I'm so excited by what you just shared. Like I've already got so many things I want to talk to you. um, so because this podcast is about supporting the navigation of our new consciousness and you taking that intuitive approach to this, which is the foundation of the new consciousness. Um, okay, I just first want to touch on the ancestral element, if we can do that. So maybe, so you have the background in holistic nutrition. Is it about what we're eating, how we're eating, a combination of both, and how does that tie into the ancestral work?
Yeah, so when I first started studying holistic nutrition, I got out of school and I had all this knowledge and I was like ready to change the world. Yeah, let's do this. Everyone needs to eat local and farmers markets and back to the land. Let's do this. But then I was still personally, I was still struggling with emotional eating and overeating. I'm like, okay, something's missing here. Like I know all I should know about nutrition. I mean, of course, they're always learning, but after studying and getting a diploma, you should feel like very good about what you eat every day and not have to worry about it. So I kind of thought there's something missing here. Then in the early years of my practice, I started having more people saying, like, I already know what to eat. You don't even need to tell me. Like, I know that carrots are good and soup and homemade food, whole foods. Like, I understand that, but I'm just not doing it. And so, because I started seeing this pattern over and over again in my clients and myself, I'm like, okay, I need to look a little bit deeper into this. So, that's when I started studying cognitive behavioral therapy. I looked into, teachings about mindful eating. And then in 2018 is when I started studying shamanic medicine. And that's when I learned about how trauma plays a role in what we're eating. And so, because everything's about intention, we can eat something that's not good for us with this like mindful intention of this food isn't hurting me. I'm just enjoying the moment. Because I'm conscious of it, it's not harming me. Right. And then we go down, that's like the rabbit hole of quantum physics and all of this. But to answer your question, a lot of the problems that people have, I'm a hand talker in case you haven't noticed. A lot of the problems that people have that they come to me for where they're saying, I eat too much of this, or I binge on this at night, or I can't stop eating this, even though I know that it's really harming me or hurting me. That's when that's when we can sort of bridge off into the ancestral work, is because we can start looking back into people's childhood and trying to figure out where these things came from. But then when I do medicine work with people, we can also find out if that was a pain in that lineage that they're just still carrying. And if it is, how can we, do medicine work, a soul retrieval to heal that? Because it's not yours to carry. It doesn't need to be held by you anymore necessarily. And especially if you're harming yourself with that choice, then it's something that people want to clear, you know? And so my best example for this that people don't understand that this is lineage work is when we say, you know, I have this I have this idea that I need to finish my plate. Like that was, you know, pounded into people's heads as a kid. You have to finish your plate. You have to finish your plate. And so then as adults, they're like, oh crap, I have to finish my plate. No, we don't. We have refrigeration now. You can just
Right.
eat until you're full and then put it away for later and then go back to it later if you want. Like that is a war era rations uh, wounding. And those people pass it on to their kids that pass it on to the people I'm working with right now who are still struggling with this really hard wounding of I need to finish my plate otherwise I'm a bad person, I'm wasteful, right? But it's not based in reality anymore because that's from an era where we had rations and we didn't have refrigeration, so we literally had to finish what was on our plate, and we might have not get more food the rest of that day, so it was a requirement. So this is one of the sort of big ones that I started noticing for people and realizing, oh, that's from the war and this can be healed. So that, you know, it's looking at these sort of um things that people think, oh, that's just how I am. No, 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 let's dig into it. Let's figure out where it comes from so that we can shift it so that you don't have to worry about that anymore. And then you can clear that off your plate of worries and you can just be able to eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, and then get back to the life that you want to live.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, so because everything, like this is what I'm seeing right now, is because everything is cyclical, you know, things repeat themselves. And here we are again in this time of where we can easily be in that place of scarcity, that mindset because of the inflation and the cost of everything. And so, are you finding that that's kind of rising up again with your work and your clients, that people are maybe clamping down a bit more because food is costing more than it has
Mm-hmm.
in our lifetimes? And I think that's fair to say. Are you finding that that's sort of coming back around because of that? Are people finding like that they're feeling there's something about the we hold that guilt and the shame, right? We function in that, even though it's not highly functional. But we
Mm-hmm.
put that in. And so right now, if we're feeding our family and it's, you know, thing like the budget is a little bit tighter, and so we might want to pass that back on to our kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Um, that's really tricky, and you know, it's like the way that I run my practice is really case by case because everyone's so different, right? So I'll have people that will say, you know, oh, I'll just you know, I'll just adjust my budget to make it work. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And then there's other people that are like I'm cutting out this and this so that I can still afford these foods. Or, you know, it's like it's all about trying to fit to adjust. And so, like, I guess my answer would be it just comes down to prioritizing for people. It's like how much do you prioritize your wellness? Because, you know, everyone's talking about um, the healthcare system, but not as many people are talking about the healthcare that we can do for ourselves, which is purchasing healthy food. And so, you know, people don't like preventative medicine, though. That's the funny thing. Like, people don't really think about it until something happens and they fucking have to. And
Yeah.
so so that this idea of like how do I prioritize healthy eating, or how do I make it work for me, for my family, like that's a case by case thing. Personally for me, because of not just because of what I do, but because of the way that my body is and the way that I want to treat myself, I will prioritize eating well over basically anything else. I mean, it's just so important to me because I know how I want to feel in my body, I'll prioritize it. I, you know, that's part of how I got on the sober journey. There's multiple foods and things I had to give up in order to heal certain things. So I don't have these attachment to things like sugar or gluten anymore because I had to give them up for these periods. And so now it's just they're just things that exist, but they don't necessarily have any control or power over me. And I think that's a big part of, when people are shopping and they feel like, oh, I need this and this and that. It's like we can like do some work on like who's running the show here and who's controlling what. Because if you're grocery shopping and you want to feel in control, like you're gonna need that if you're worried about your budget, right? And there's gonna have to be changes made where you're saying, okay, well, if our grocery budget looks like this, but now food prices are rising, so we only have this to work with. Well, what are we going to cut out? And if we don't want to cut out things from our life to make it work, then we have to cut things out of our cart to make it work. And so to me, the obvious one would be junk food. And I tell this to people all the time. It's like, if you want to save money on groceries, literally just stop buying junk food. Like that will save you a lot of money. And a lot of people are used to having pop and chips and always ice cream in the freezer and cookies and crackers, and all of those things are like a big chunk of the budget. I don't buy those things. Like chips are like a treat, maybe like once a month, maybe, but when we load our cart with all these like unnecessary food products, that's just like you're basically paying for stuff to hurt you,
Right.
and I mean that opens the whole addictions conversation of like, why are we harming ourselves with these things that we're paying money to these companies to harm us? Like that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And even the term, the junk food, and it's not food. It's
Right.
not. We're literally, like, if we think of junk, we'd probably throw it away. So we're literally throwing our money away because,
Yeah.
except for the pass through that it takes is can be harmful.
Yeah.
So this is kind of coming to the one of the things I wanted to talk with you about was the topic of addiction through consumption, through, we were talking about food, we were talking about, because you were talking about your social media about like Black Friday and consumerism and those types of things. um, so it seems like it's encompassed within this spectrum of addiction, and let's talk about that for a little bit here. So can we define addiction and explore how do we identify addiction? Or
Hmm. I mean, I guess the thing that I should, disclaimer is that this work that I do for clients and in my sobriety community, like I never thought I would do anything like this. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I'd be running a sobriety community online and teaching spiritual medicine work that helps people get sober, I would literally laugh in your face, like, what? And then I would have ordered another craft beer. Like, there's no way that I thought I would have ended up here teaching all this. Um, but my disclaimer is that I'm not an addictions counselor. I'm not a therapist. I am a spirit medicine worker and a nutritionist, and I've been sober for almost 3 years. So, that's my disclaimer, is like I'm just a teacher. I haven't studied this, but I do really, really love and follow Dr. Gabor Mate's teachings, which I'm sure you're aware of. Most people really love Dr. Gabor Mate. He has such a regulated, relaxed feeling, and so I think that is an inspiration for people who are seeking that kind of medicine. And I do believe that when we're having addictive tendencies, that's what we're actually seeking. We're just not aware of it, or we're not aware of the language around it. When I first started doing a lot of healing work, I didn't realize that my nervous system was so dysfunctional. I was so dysregulated all of the time that a huge part of my healing was going to come in learning how to make myself feel safe, because I was using food, substances, people, music, work, whatever, to distract myself because of that deep discomfort in my body. So, if I had to define addiction, I would use Dr. Mate's definition, which is, repeated use of either a substance or behavior, and the irritability when it's not around, and the if someone says, hey, why don't we take a break from that? You panic inside. To me, those are the three indicators that there's something here I need to look at. Like that, all of three of those point to there's something here, you know,
Right.
and we can trick ourselves too. Like I fooled myself for a long time thinking, I have balance, I'm good. And then there's that thing in the back of your head going, girl, no. Like, no, what do you mean? Like you got annoyed when you had to go away for a 3-day wellness thing because you weren't going to have your wine around. There's a problem there. We need to think about. We need to sort this, right? And it took something that I talk about my clients with around this is like it took me a long time to realize that this was an issue for me. And of course I'm in wine country, right? So it's part of the culture and it's everywhere. So I'm really trying to help people understand that there's an alternative to that culture. And the alternative is doing your work and finding out what it feels like to feel safe and relaxed in your body without substances. And hey, we can do yoga without wine. We don't need to blend the two. They don't actually belong in the same space at all.
Right.
This is a huge conversation, Tina.
So good. Yeah, I feel like we could do a full episode just on
Yeah.
this from our
Yeah.
personal experiences. And I want to support your disclaimer that neither of us are clinical experts in regards to addiction. You're coming from your perspective, I come from my perspective, which stems from my personal experience, but also my study of consciousness, um,
Mm-hmm.
of how the mind works. And what I'm hearing too is that, it is about identifying these attachments that we have, and that's a whole process in itself. And it might feel important to say that it's not like it's about identifying what that feels like, for me anyways, within yourself. When I can identify what attachment feels like,
That's right.
and what working with that, and what detaching feels like, so
Mm.
then you start to identify these attachments in your life. Because for myself, I had told you that 20 some years ago, well, yeah, 20 some years ago, I started to have my awakening. And in that process, and what I mean by awakening was that I, repeated the same old thing. I was having the same type of reaction to the same type of experience, different details, different players in the game, but my reaction was the same. Laying on the floor crying, feeling
Mm-hmm.
completely
That
alone.
mess. Yeah.
But that was the first time that I had a different response to it. And then it was
Mm.
like something like my higher self, an opening cracked open, and this light started to come in. And I literally started to have this conversation with some aspect of my consciousness that I hadn't had before. And it started asking me questions. And then I
Oh,
just
wow.
started that path, and
Yeah.
then, started drawing in support. So different books or conversations or things like that. Um, and then eventually, it's funny because I, eventually it was that my vibration had changed so much, my consciousness had expanded to a point where my relationship with alcohol just didn't fit. I didn't
Yeah.
have room for it anymore.
Yeah.
And then I went through a 2.5 year process of letting that go, because I had to flip flop. Like that was my experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and then literally it was lifted. That's a whole nother story for another day. But but then since then, it's like, I still am identifying attachments, and how and where I can detach, how, what my process is. I use prayer a lot. I use, um, I just use spirit. I
Mm-hmm.
access that. That's my go-to. And it has all completely changed my life. Um, and then, yeah, because there's those attachments can be anywhere. Their food, their substances, their behavior. I find it's all behavioral anyways. I can share for myself what I found once it became apparent to me that the my relationship with alcohol no longer fit in my life. And because I, at that time, was holding the focus on the substance, only to realize that it was the reason that I was drinking was because I was not loving myself. And then
Mm-hmm,
as soon as
mm-hmm.
I realized that, and I feel like I was shown that, and then it helped me pivot my focus towards loving myself, because that's what was missing for my,
Mm-hmm.
and then it became easier.
Yeah.
Um, but again, that's a whole journey in itself, I find, because it's easy for me to just say, okay, now I realize it, and now I'm happy and I'm in love with myself. But we're multidimensional, and there's going to be different facets of ourselves that show, that are shown to ourselves in relation to everything. And so that can be sort of the challenge of it, I would say, for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all that. And I think that it does, often have that point in it where you kind of realize, like, what, and you may, like you said, you heard it. Other people may have someone else say it to them, or then, they might receive that medicine in a different way, but to get the message of, like, this is what's actually happening with this is sort of the root of it. It's like, oh, it's such a huge light bulb, and then that's just the start of the work, though, right? It's like, and like you said, because we're multidimensional, like, as we move through our life, then there's other things that rear their head up and say, oh, hey, what about me? And you're like, oh, for crying out loud, more. It's such a beautiful journey. But I believe strongly that, these medicines, alcohol, cannabis, all medicines, they have spirit and they offer us something. And I do believe that the goal is to be able to figure out what it is they offer us that we can't offer ourselves yet, and then learn how to offer that ourselves, so that when presented with that medicine again, we're like, take it or leave it.
Right.
And that's, I'd like people, at least people I work with, to get to that point, because a lot of people say to me, well, I don't necessarily want to be sober, but I just don't want to be like, I don't want to be like this anymore. So it's like, perfect. Well, we want to get to a point where you can take it or leave it. If everyone's sitting around drinking or smoking, you'll feel comfortable saying, nah, I'm good. And I think that's what a lot of people want. But you still have to go through that awakening of, like, hey, but what is this giving me then? And figure out how to get that for yourself. So
So that,
finding that attachment. Yeah.
yeah, and that sounds to me like it's like finding that place of true self empowerment,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not the not the illusory form where I
That's
can
right.
I can easily convince myself that I'm making a choice that's good for myself.
Oh yeah, we love to justify things and yeah.
Screaming at me like, no, but I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I got this. But that's all fine too. It's, yeah, I find, I think that relaxing the restrictions that we can put on ourselves, give ourselves some
Yeah.
room to make choice and to have the experience. If we do that consciously, that's the game changer.
It is, Tina, and I've always taught. I mean, even before, way before I went sober and I was only teaching this in regards to nutrition, but it works for substances as well. And that is this idea or theory that our society's concept of willpower is very twisted, and that willpower is actually meant to be a practice, an exercise in the moment of consciousness. And in that moment, well, what do I want? How is this going to make me feel? How is this going to affect me later? And so the story that I like to tell around that is, say you're at a party and there's a huge cheese platter and you're like, oh, I love cheese. I'm going to load up my plate with like 30 pieces of cheese. And then you just like, yeah, cheese, all the cheese. But then you realize, like, oh, now I feel really gross, and oh, I'm kind of bloated. And the next day you're like, yikes, that was like probably the cheese from last night. It just wasn't a good scenario. So you track that experience. Then at the next party, you see another cheese platter. You go, oh my God, cheese, I love cheese. And then you get to exercise willpower. Then you get to, oh, okay, hold on. What happened last time? Do I want to repeat that experience? Do I not want to repeat that experience? Or can I meet in the middle with the cheese? Maybe I'm going to have 3 pieces and really mindfully eat them and slow down. instead of gorging myself, or instead of saying, no, I can't have it. Well, cheese takes all my power, right? Like cheese has no power over you. You're in control. So when I lay that out for people and get them to understand that willpower isn't this like special, secret, sacred trait that only certain people have, it's just mindfulness and stopping in that moment to think about it, that practice, that exercise that we get to do it over and over and over again. I've been practicing it for 12 years. That practice is what willpower is. It's not this like special juice that people drink and they just have it. It's just in the moment, you know?
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I find, I think one of our older ideas regarding dealing with habits, I'll say, um, is to quit it completely. And we have the
Mm-hmm,
culture, we
mm-hmm.
have all of that. I found in my experience, one of the gifts that I feel came through with my experience was because these things started to become apparent to me where I was like, well, wait a second. I'm using language like I quit drinking and I quit, if I quit something, it's still, I could feel this energetic ball and chain that I was
Yeah,
dragging around
yeah,
with me because I wasn't aligned with that choice.
yeah,
So what I'm kind of hearing with what you're sharing is that abstinence isn't necessarily the path to dealing with these habitual patterns. It's more about that empowerment through understanding the power of your choice.
yeah, absolutely.
To say,
And like I know you're sober, and I choose sobriety mainly for how I feel. It's like there is selfish reasons there. I want to feel really good in my body, and I know that substances don't make me feel good. I also am holding my sobriety for integrity because I work with people's energies. And I
yeah,
don't want to have other spirits involving themselves in that work. And so for me, that is another part of what keeps me staying sober and choosing it. But for people I work with, that's not necessarily a thing for them. It's just like, yeah, I just want to feel better and not have this, this nagging at me all the time. And that's, like that's what Gabor talks about, is like that hungry ghost is always got to fill this void, fill this void. And so like learning how to manage that with nervous system healing and healthy food and trauma healing, that can get people to that point where they don't necessarily have to be abstinent, but they're like, yeah, I can take it or leave it now. I have shifted my relationship with that substance. And that's one of the key things that I teach to people in my Facebook group is like, you don't have to be perfect, because that's black or white thinking, right? You don't have to be all the time, but you want to be able to shift your relationship with it so that it's not coming from that place of desperation, feeling this, pull again, like the cheese, as if alcohol has power over you.
mhm,
And spiritually speaking, yes, it can, and it's dangerous. And so we want to be able to look at that relationship, and we can't, deal with this stuff until we really pull it out and look at it. So I'm always encouraging people to like lift up that rug. I'm right beside you. We will lift it together. It's like probably pretty fucking dusty under there, but we'll do it together. We'll look at the stuff, and then we'll start, right? We'll start sweeping it out to look at it and try to figure out where we can go with it. So, but just that peeking under the rug itself at the very beginning, a lot of people are ashamed to acknowledge that they have these behavioral or food or substance issues, right? So there's a lot of resistance
mhm,
around even wanting to look at all. And
mhm.
so, but once we get there, once we're like, hit whatever our version or our story is of what rock bottom looks like for us, then we get to start this like spiritual excavation where it gets really juicy and really good.
Yeah, yeah. And it's clear that you offer such a safe space for people to be able to explore that, which is so important. And I know that through my work as well, because we do the deep dives. This isn't about dealing with something on the surface. It's not about do this, don't do that on that surface level. You have to go deep, and it's so worth it. And we're in this time now where we are evolving so rapidly that it's inevitable for most people on this planet at this time are going to have these experiences of this awakening, and how whatever that brings for them, and if they have their habitual or addictive patterns in regards to this or that or that, it's all within us, and it's all it's all so doable. It is so it's so amazing to be able to like I mean, I just turned 50 this year. I feel like I have lived,
Woo!
I don't know how many lifetimes.
Yeah.
When I talk about that person who, pre sobriety, like I send so much love to that person, but that little girl, like she was so scared of the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
she didn't know who she was. Um, yeah, all, and so even like doing that work is so important. Whether or not you have a relationship with drugs or alcohol, it's still in all of us. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, this is so powerful. And when I'm talking about navigating in our new consciousness, like we are in this time where we're in a new energetic cycle that is supportive of this. And maybe that's something that can be helpful for at least one person to hear, that you are so supported. We are also supported in this time of rapid evolution. Everything is feeling so shaken up within us, and there's incremental shifts in energy. And so we can have these like really smooth um, flows of energy, and then we can get sucked back with an ebb because like there's it's somewhere deeper that we have to bring up, within our subconscious or unconscious, and bring that up and bring some love and light to it, and then just keep evolving.
It's so exciting. I mean,
It
I'm
really
just
is.
thinking about, um, well, first of all, I want to address that, thinking about when you look back at your past selves. And that is one layer of the sobriety journey as well, is looking back and almost grieving those old versions and saying, I'm so sorry, honey. Like there's things I look back at and stories and things that happened, and I just think that poor hurt little girl, like I would have never made that choice where I'm at now. But at the time it was just, I just did it. And
Mhm.
so it's part of the, like one of the layers of doing this healing work is experiencing grief for those times that you lost when you were unhealed. And I think that's really a scary part of the journey. And, like we said, you got to sort of grab people's hand and be like, we're going deep. And I think it's important that people understand that it is scary. And there was times in my journey, because I did mine alone, I did my work alone. There was times that, you're just like an absolute mess, and you're totally falling apart, and you're screaming and crying and having a meltdown, and you're just like, what, why am I doing this? What is this? Then you come out the other side and you're a different woman, and then a month later you're a different woman, and you keep going one step, one step, one step, and then finally you look back and go, oh my god, look how far I came, this is incredible. And sober people used to kind of scare me. They had this like power that I didn't really understand and I didn't like. It was challenging me. And now that I get to be that, I understand what it is. It's not a power over other people. It is a depth of personal power that you only get when you face that darkness, when you sit there and cry and scream and have your meltdowns and continue to observe yourself in that. That's where you're developing that personal power, where then you get to look back and go, oh my god, look what I dealt with, look what I excavated, look what I healed, look what I examined. And um you know the other thing I wanted to address in what you said was, and I appreciate you saying this, oh, that you create safe space for people to do their work. That's always my intention, but technically I don't know what safe is for other people. And I know that when I was very unhealed, nowhere and no one was safe. So I do my best to make people feel that they can say anything to me and it won't shock me. But
Mhm.
technically, um, I can be trauma informed, but that's the best I can be. I can't actually make people feel safe. They have to do that work themselves. And me realizing that I had to do that work myself to make myself feel safe because I wasn't getting it externally. That was where some of the biggest work that I did came from. So, yes, I want people to feel safe around me. That is obviously the best condition where we can do that work. But most, not most, I should say, a lot of people, just we are walking through the world feeling unsafe everywhere, and that is something that's hard to admit. Again, there's that shame of being able to acknowledge that that's how you feel. And I think a lot of us carry that in our body. And again, that's going back ancestrally, like what did my mom feel? What did her mom feel? Where did this come from, in which line or both, where we used substances or food or people or whatever that built this stress that we then carry in our body and pass down. Where, like, what are the pieces that came from, and how can I start uncovering that? I'm sure that you feel this in your practice too, like, because humans are so beautiful and messy, we're like this amazing puzzle. We're like a 4,000 piece puzzle. And it's just like you're always like moving pieces around, and oh, I think this piece fits here. Oh God, no, it doesn't. Okay, no, maybe it fits over here, right? And I love that analogy because like I feel like if I had to choose, other than healing, if I had to choose what our purpose here on life is, it's just like we could fuck around in this puzzle. And we don't know what this puzzle is even going to look like at the end, but it's just fun to move things around and see what fits. And oh, what's that? What's the picture there? And how does this picture all entangle with other parts of the puzzle? Like we get to do that. We get to move things around. And like you said about turning 50, it's like you look back and you're like, wow, look at all these women I got to live as. And I mean, I'm only 35. I'm still training to be an elder, but I still feel that I have lived so many lives already. Like, I mean, childhood aside, when I think about teenager Raina to now, it's like, oh my God, like different human, different human, different human. And it's like, but that's the puzzle. It's really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. And it's wonderful because, and I love the puzzle analogy, and I love the big picture because we'll never see it. We'll never see the fullness of it. And
Right.
and so it is all about the journey. It is all about the process. So we have, now this is part of like my work is like, cause I look at all these, we're shifting from a linear consciousness to our multidimensional consciousness. And in the linear consciousness, we love to set finish lines. We think, okay, here's the goal. I'm going to get there and then it's done. But then, of course, what happens is that there's like another and another and another. But we're no longer really approaching this in a linear way where it can go from any direction at any time. And so, if we are still holding this idea of a point of completion, we can begin to let that go. And part of, I find, is the focus is in enjoying that, like finding the fun in that you're never going to get it done. We've heard this from Abraham Hicks and all these,
Yeah.
channeled sources, and you really never do. And as you were talking about the puzzle pieces, like I was even picturing like, okay, oh, this one doesn't fit. Oh, it's because it's upside down. Well, what happens if I just turn it over? Oh, then it fits. And that's exciting. But then you're going to go on to like, oh, okay, well, these pieces.
Yeah,
And then
that's right.
learning to actually find some enjoyment in that, because then it's like, I know they're going to fit eventually. And it's
Yeah.
maybe I leave this part of the puzzle for now. And then I go to this section and I'm going to make a cloud instead of a duck.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. And one of the teachings of my medicine practice is like, this life death cycle that's in our DNA that our ancestors carried, and we have access to that as well. And so when we're thinking about the puzzle, I'm like thinking about the death life cycle, because you can also just throw the puzzle in the dumpster and get a new one. Burn, restart. That's one of me and my girlfriends sort of, it's a reminder that we have for each other when things are really bad. We're like, hey, do you need to just like Molotov cocktail this and restart? Right? Like
Oh,
at any time, you can just say, I'm out. And you can
yeah,
change the direction. And that's kind of a reminder we have for each other because there has been times where we've said, mm, I want to do that, but I know that's a trauma response. And then there's been times where we're like, yes, I need to do that. This is not a situation that I want to be in anymore. And you get the free will to choose that, right? So I like that reminder too, because I think people they get really feeling stuck in the way that their lives are, and they don't know the concept that like you're the creator at any time. You can just change things, you know? If you
it
have to, if you want to, just do it.
it's probably the most liberating thing is to really understand that there are no rules. There's no
Yeah.
rules to any of this. And
Yeah.
but because we've been conditioned to follow rules, that's that linear mindset, right? It's the fall
That's
in
right.
line, it's militant, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so we like, I should be doing this. I should do this in order to be a good person. I should, but there's
Yeah.
no rules. So I love the Molotov cocktail.
Burn
I love that.
it all.
Burn
Yeah,
it.
there's no
Yeah.
rules. And you know that and another thing about rules that is sort of triggering my mind is to say, you know, one of the I guess promoters of things, promotions, whatever, things I would have said early on in my sober journey to people is like, you know, the mainstream wants you high right now. They want you drunk and high and sleeping and numb. And so it's actually like really fucking rebellious to say, I'm not doing any of that. I want to be fully awake, fully alive, to be able to make these choices and say, actually, I'm going to buy a van and go live in it up in the hills for a few months because I need out of this. Bye. Right. And oh, I am going to start a shamanic medicine practice, even though people told me that I shouldn't be doing that. Or, you know, like all of these things that we think there's like restrictions on, it's just us. And so, you know, this idea of like, this is what the mainstream says, but you're your own culture. So create your own counterculture to the mainstream. Like that to me is like, that's so exciting. That's so fun. And you know, my so much of my business in the early days was like I was such a into the 60s and 60s culture and music, and I would always say to people, I could beat your dad at name that tune. Like I like at 60s 70s music, I know it. I know it, and I know the lyrics. I store the lyrics in my head. Like it's my jam. And so because that was such a big part of my life, I really dug into what does the counterculture mean to me. How do I set myself away from what the mainstream's doing? And that sort of rolled off into my business where I was like, well, if the mainstream wants you dieting, then what's the alternative to that? Well, I guess it's eating local food as much as possible and buying from fruit stands when you can instead of superstore, and you know, not dieting ever again and trying to grow your own food if you can, right? Like there's tons of ways to be alternative to the mainstream, not buying fast food. So that's a big part of, you know, this being an alternative to the mainstream kind of fits in all these different pieces, right? It fits in food, it fits in healing, it fits in sobriety. um and I think that this, you know, like, oh, like you said, this big awakening that we're in right now, I think that's such a beautiful drumbeat to it because, you know, it's like we have to do this personal revolution first, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and yes, because that is what is creating our new world.
That's right.
Even the idea of the mainstream, like when we're thinking linear, that's the epitome of linear consciousness, is because in our linear way of being and perceiving ourselves and each other and life is we created this mainstream of information, which is just this
Hmm.
line that we somehow developed these ideas that if you go outside of that, well, there's all sorts of names, right? you're
Yeah. Yeah. All the
you're
names.
problematic. You're problematic to society when,
Yeah.
like, how explain that? So here we
Hmm.
are creating this whole new earth of new consciousness that is so unique and diverse and individualized and sovereign and all of that. And the key is knowing the self,
Mhm.
knowing yourself, and
Yeah.
living that. And here we are having this experience where these last few years has been like, whoa, like this rock and roll of like shake up. And then now we're starting to settle a little bit, and there's more and more and more of that. But this is going to speed up even more because it's everything is supporting us in living as our truth, what my truth
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
And when I live in my truth, I'm happy. And when I'm happy with you. Like it doesn't matter how you're living your
Yeah.
life, because when I'm happy, I have no desire to hurt anyone or to bring anyone down or any or criticize or anything like that. It's easier to live in a state of love and compassion for all that is, because that's our nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
the
love that.
about being different, or the concern about, because it's that linear consciousness is also conformity. So we're
Mhm.
coming up with that, and that's a hard habit to break. There's so many dimensional layers to that,
Yeah.
right? Because like we
Yeah.
should eat these ways, we should consume in these ways,
Mhm.
we should be these ways, we should do these ways. We don't even think about being, we just think about doing and having, right? We have really no idea who we are, but here we are having these awakenings.
Yes. Yes. And it's very cool that I get to sit on my phone and talk to you 4 hours away, and we get to have these amazing conversations.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's so true. And when it comes to consumption, I think that is such a powerful layer in all of this exploration again is, whether or not you're going through a healing journey or trying to get out of mainstream, there is a part of you that has to deal with the consumer mindset, because we get to this point where we're like, hey, I'm not a consumer, I'm a human being, and I'm a sovereign being, and I'm not here just to serve those systems.
Hmm.
And so when we go like in depth with that realization, it can get us to a point where, you know, like years and years ago, I would have been like, oh, I could never fast. I could never do that. But now fasting is something that if my body asks for, I can easily slip into and move into for myself, because it's a choice. And I'm like, yeah, I can take a break from consuming and it doesn't feel bad, right? Like I've healed that relationship to being a consumer. I mean, of course, there's that part of us that has to consume in order to survive. But again, it goes back to that willpower of like, but who's in control of who, right? Who's really running this show? And so, the I talk a lot in my practice about minimalism and, anti-consumerism as a practice. It's so important that people understand that, like, I didn't come from that. I crafted that. It's very typical to celebrate the holidays with huge presents and celebrate the things with this and celebrate this with that, and like all of the typical things that we do, right? Like that's looking at those things and going, okay, but how do I want to participate in this? Do I want it to look like that? And how do I want my life to feel? And how do I interact with shops, with goods, with food? Like how am I being a consumer that feels good to me? I think that's really, really important. And I talk about minimalism a lot in my nutrition practice as, a layer for people to look at, as in like, if we apply the principles of minimalism to our food, then we're eating what we need, and we're not eating in excess. And so I get people to sort of see that parallel of like, you see, it's the same thing, right? And so, we, when I talk about minimalism, and not that, again, same as sobriety, not that everyone needs to be a minimalist. My lifestyle allows for me to be able to be that. But on the journey to get there, I was, I'm realizing, well, what was I in the mindset of when I bought all these things? What was I doing? And then you realize that when you bought all that stuff you didn't need was when you were trying to fill that void. But like you said earlier, now you do that with prayer and spirit. You don't need to fill that void with things. You don't need to go shopping and like it's just not there anymore. That need, that call to fill that void with things as a consumer literally doesn't exist in you anymore. And that is so liberating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And great time for us to be having this discussion because we're getting this like swell of, this I gotta go get things.
Yeah.
Which for me is a very anxiety inducing.
Yes.
I love minimalism myself. Um, yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of people are, I mean, my brother just said to me yesterday, he said, "Oh, all I'm seeing online is people talking about like no thanks Black Friday." And you know what I mean? Like he's like, "I feel like people are starting to question all this." And I'm like, "Good. That's really
Mm-hmm.
wonderful." Because it is, the post that I had on my Instagram about it was like, this isn't a holiday. There's nothing we're celebrating. It's literally just a holiday for consuming. Like for anyone to look at that and like examine it for even a minute would be like, huh? Like, what? I don't get it. If
Yeah.
that's our culture as a society, that's really, really a sad state of affairs. So one of the trainings that I did in my Facebook group was teaching people about connecting ancestrally at holidays. So it's like not to say that you need to demolish Christmas just because you've decided to be more anti-consumerist, but what does that holiday season look like in your family tree, in your ancestry? Like whether you have indigenous ancestry or European ancestry or looking at all of these backgrounds and going, well, what did my ancestors do at that time? And how can I start bringing in some of those rituals? So it doesn't have to be about, you know, bacon and eggs and 100 gifts and getting drunk. Like, let's do it different. What does that look like? No,
Yeah.
I can make you laugh.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's just like, oh, childhood memories. Yeah.
I know. And hey, I'm still gonna
Oh,
eat my eggs Benny at my parents on Christmas, but we've made some shifts to make Christmas feel different, and I'm gonna be celebrating solstice this Christmas. I'm gonna be doing different holiday celebrations and offerings for healing circles. I'm gonna be with people in my Métis community. Like there's different elements coming in now that feel really special. That Santa Claus was magical as a kid. I fucking love that. It was such a beautiful time. um, I don't have kids, so my Christmas gets to look different now. And so, I get to choose, what do I want it to feel like? What do I want it to look like? And how do I want it to honor the work that I do and honor my spirit as well?
mhm.
Because it is a dark season, and I get a lot of unhappy people in my practice over the holiday season. It's dark, it's dreary. People are generally not happy, and so it's like, how do we shift that, change that to not necessarily bypass the darkness because there's medicine there for sure that we want to sit with, but how do we also bring in more light and more rituals or practices around making ourselves feel whole? That's the whole goal, is like, is there things that I can do, that I can bring in, that will honor all parts of me? you know what does that look like?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could have a whole discussion on just marketing on its own, the
Oh
power.
yes.
Oof,
I got stuff to say.
me too. Oh boy, but like even looking at, are the depictions of this holiday and or just this time of year and going into the grocery store and the music and you can
Mhm.
start to feel this elevation of energy and then there's this sort of crash, but there's this depiction
Yeah.
of this picturesque idea of how this time of year is to be spent, but the reality for most people is not that, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, coming back to like, there's no rules. There's just things that we've conditioned our minds with, and we can recreate anything at any point.
Absolutely.
Make it your
Yeah.
own. Yeah.
Yeah. I had
Yeah.
a client said to me last week, when I because part of my medicine is very gently calling people out on their stuff. And so when I proposed this to her on a silver platter, she said, "Well, the story that I told myself was blah 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 blah." And I just was like so excited to hear her say that, because you talked earlier about like, oh, we justify things, we have excuses, we create these things in our heads, right? And so when she said that, it was such a light bulb moment of like, yes, she's right. Like it's literally just a story, and we get to rewrite that story, we get to observe that story, um we get to work that story however we want. It's ours. And I think there's so much power and so much potency in that people aren't necessarily aware that they have the ability to do. And that's, so much of what practices like meditation can get us to be able to learn, is like once we have that certain level of awareness of observance of ourselves, then we get to that point where we're like, okay, I see that in me. Now what? Right? And like what's the next step?
Mhm.
And you don't have to take that step right away. You can just sit in observance for a long time too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's endless. And I feel like that's something that can be helpful for our old mental conditioning, our old mind, to realize again, and I'll just repeat it again because I do think it's important, that once we make this shift into love, like living as love consciously, we then begin to explore what love is for us. And we need to understand that love is infinite. And so there's no end to the expression of ourself. We will continue to evolve and evolve and evolve. We're not going to stay the same. At 50 years old, one of the things that I'm looking at is like, like, whoa, there's so many layers of like just acceptance of different stages of life. And now looking forward towards this different life versus when I was 15 years old, 20 years old, and looking at the idea of 50 was so far from that. And you change so much in those decades. And then now looking at this, like all the changes that happen with menopause and all these sort of things, but all the resistance that I didn't know was there because I never thought about it because I didn't have anybody guiding me.
Yeah.
And so just even that, and applying that understanding of like, okay, but I'm evolving, and I like how
Mm-hmm.
my mind wants to grip me into a singular idea of what the rest of my life is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
um but still like having to like, I choose to open that up and go, oh, wait a second, I'm choosing, I'm creating
Yeah.
this, and it can go in any direction
Yeah.
at any time, and just following what that resonance and that truth is within the self, because it's different for
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's
Yeah,
the same vibration,
that's
like
really
love is,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. I think and you mentioned early, like when you were in your sobriety journey, realizing that those were moments when you didn't love yourself. And if I had to again go back to the puzzle analogy, if I could throw another thing on the pile of what our purpose is to be here, then that's definitely part of it. Like if there's moments when we feel triggered, or we feel self-hatred, or we feel like we're judging ourselves, or we feel anything negative, it's like how can I love myself right now? And that can be like just a huge switch for us to be able to make that choice, move forward, and make that choice perhaps differently, so that we feel different, right? Like it's all about wanting to, like you said, be in that vibration of love, and like feeling peace and feeling safety. Like that's that's so worth it. That's so worth it. Like 5, 10 years ago, never imagined that I would get to a place where I feel so calm and safe and so relaxed and so excited to be in my body. like there's always that piece of like wanting to escape. And so, like when we're doing behaviors or choosing foods or substances that are numbing that, that's like so much a part of it is that trying to escape that discomfort. But like you said, if we come back to love, it's like how can I, love myself in this and through it to be able to make that change. It's such a beautiful process.
Yeah, and I will make the claim that there is really nothing more valuable than that in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Yeah.
All the things outside of ourselves, they like we've heard, when we pass, we don't take them with us, but we take ourself, who
Yeah.
we are, right? And so when we have that focus and choose that relationship first as our ultimate priority in life, nothing is more valuable than that.
Yeah.
Ah,
I love it.
that feels good. I love it too. I love this conversation. Thank you. You're amazing.
You're amazing.
Okay.
It's been a long time since we saw each other. I'm so
It has,
glad that you reached out to me.
yeah. Well, again, I'll say thank you to my little spidey sense that said, "Hey, why don't you get in touch with Raina?"
That's great.
Yeah. So, if this is feeling complete, I think we can wrap it up. Unless there's anything else that you want to add.
No, I
I
think
would
the
love for
last,
you. Sorry, I would love for you to also share like how people can get in touch with you and your work. But
oh,
sorry,
sure. Yeah, no, no, no. I was just trying to think if there's any last pieces I should leave, but I mean, we really covered so much. And I guess I would just say if there's anyone that's, feeling called to like examining their behaviors around repeated behaviors or food things, substances things that like kind of there's that little voice in the back of your head that's like, eh, but you've been ignoring it for a long time. Like follow that feeling because there's work for you there and there's medicine there. And I waited a really long time to be able to sink into that. And so I really encourage people to just do that work. Um, I I can be found online. I If people Google Lutz Nutrition or just my name, Raina Lutz, I'll pop up. My website will pop up and people can send me a message and book a chat. I do have an online offering right now. And then I do have a Facebook group, which is only $7 a month. And that is a really amazing community that is full of accountability and motivation and recipes and full moon teachings. And it's such a great community. I also have a sober positive Facebook group that is a free community and it's called Free Spirits Community. And that's one of my favorite places to hang out online as well. So I really like Facebook. I hang out on Facebook a lot. A lot of the coolest people that hang out with me are on Facebook. So that's a good place to look me up as well. So Tina, thank you so much for having me. I really loved chatting with you today. I'm so honored that you chose me to be the first. It's so exciting.
I can't thank you enough. This is I'll just take a little moment just to kind of celebrate this because this project has been birthing within me for it feels like many years, and we've had a discussion about this prior to recording, and just recently it was there's a timing to everything. I want to say that to to everybody. So if you are feeling like you're being hard on yourself because you're not where you think you're supposed to be, just trust in the process. And Raina, I cannot
Yes.
thank you enough, for being on this first episode. We had some technical difficulties getting into this, and
Just a little.
probably had some, I think, during this as well with the little recording notification. So if that showed up, I sorry.
For figuring it
Technology
out.
is a little lower down on my skill set level. Yeah, and all of your links. This is going to be posted on my YouTube channel, so I will post Raina's links below this video. So do check out her amazing work because she is such a beautiful soul.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Raina, and thank you everyone for helping make this happen. So so much love to you, and we'll see you again in episode 2.
Bye bye.
Bye.